This is 20 Cigarettes is your second feature-length digital film, correct? Or at least the ones that have been out on the festival circuit? Or are there more that I don't know about?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean, I've made another one that I haven't shown, so that doesn't quite. I remade Faces, the John Cassavetes film.
Really?
Shot for shot. So.
And you're not going to show it, or you just haven't shown
I
it?
don't know what to do with it. It's very good, but I don't know if it's my film. It seems like somebody else should have made it. But I like it. I reconstructed the whole film using one face, or from if like the third shot, 3 people go home, then there'll be just 3 faces. I only used the face close-ups, but then I extend them to the length of the scene. So if the scene's a half hour, you see, and then I measured the amount of screen time each person had. So if one of those people was on half for the time for the half hour, you see Gina Rollins for 15 minutes, and then the other 2 characters, if they were evenly, they'd each get a quarter or whatever. So I remapped their faces time-wise into every scene.
And is it the same script and everything? Or
yeah, it's silent, because except for 2 places where there's music, where there's the nightclub scenes. So I put some. The first one has jazz music, and the other one has disco music, because the first one was a jazz club, and the other one. Mm-hmm. So that's the only time there's. It's actually quite interesting. If you know the film well, you see the whole film as faces rather than dialogue. Mm-hmm. So finally the film matches its title.
It'd be really good to see that,
actually. Yeah.
Well, of the ones I have seen, Roar and 20 Cigarettes, I was wondering if your strategies or your awareness of the format, the digital format, changed at all from one film to the next one, or even considering the Faces project, if you have sort of become aware of things that you weren't aware of with Roar.
I don't know if I considered that question. I mean, I considered the frame when I made Roar, of how I framed each of those scenes in Roar. They're framed differently. And they deal with the space inside of a tunnel or a factory or on a street or whatever. So the frame was constructed as the outside or inside space that I'm recording. And then 20 Cigarettes, I flatten the space with the flat backgrounds. I make the backgrounds rather minimal, so that the person becomes more distinguishable in the frame than the main subject of the frame, rather. Although there's things in the background that you occasionally look at when they're smoking. I do have little things here and there that catch your eye. So the strategies in those 2 films are completely different as to the way space is developed. So
for the backgrounds, did you let the smoker choose the backdrop?
No, I controlled everything, and then I many times had them bring different clothes so I could match clothes to the background. And so there's a whole kind of choreographing of color, dance off the people to the background and back. Mm-hmm. So the colors kind of match.
Also with Roar, you had this, the Part 2 of Roar was a long, hour-long shot, which wouldn't have been possible had you shot the film on 16 millimeters. But in terms of shot length, at least for 20 Cigarettes, there's nothing that seems to be beyond.
It's true. The longest shot, none of the longest was 11 minutes, so they would have been contained with a 400-foot.
But do you think that the film itself, other than the graininess of film, do you think it would have ended up somehow differently had you chosen to shoot it with 16 millimeter?
Well, I certainly would have referenced smoking in the cinema more directly if it would have been on film. So one would be thinking more about how the cigarette was used in cinema, which I'm not that concerned with. But that's one thing that would have happened. I mean, I tried to use the digital camera in a way that it wasn't, I mean, it can get such a fine focus that people can becomes hyper real almost, and I used lighting and things to diminish that. So I tried to make the film look like, or the video to look like the softness of film, somewhat, you know. So because when I watch like high definition newscasts and they light people really harshly, they look scary to me.
Right.
And I didn't want to. I think digital film can look beautiful if the light is right, and if it's wrong, it just becomes grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, were there any films in either avant-garde or narrative that you either had in mind while you were shooting or while you were conceptualizing the project? Like, for instance, Warhol's screen test?
Yeah, of course. The screen test, actually, I had re-seen about 3 years ago, and they inspired me to remake a film of mine from the 90s called North on Evers, which had 60 portraits. It was a motorcycle trip around the U.S., and it was mainly landscapes and then 60 portraits of people, but it was all handheld, and it was shot with a spring-line Bolex. So the shots are rather short, and a lot of them are actually edited in the camera. Mm-hmm. And that film has probably almost close to 700 shots in it, so which many shots compared to maybe more than all my other films combined. And so that film, I started to think about portraiture, and then when I saw the Warhol screen tests, I decided to copy all of the portraits from that film with my digital camera, and they were all about 10 seconds long, and I slowed them down 6 times so they became a minute long, and then I made a little bit over an hour long silent film of just the portraits from that film. And that film also had a handwritten diary entry in it that ran through that was animated through the bottom of the frame. And what I did was, so when you watch the original film, you'd see landscapes, people, and you'd be reading this diary on the bottom. And the diary would always be a little late, so you'd be reading about the people after you saw them, or the landscapes. So you kind of saw 2 films in your head, the one that's on the screen and the one you're reading. And then the one you're reading could be readjusted to what you see. So that's how the original did. And then when I redid it and I took just the portraits out, I made an hour-long silent film, and then as a performance I read the text afterwards. So first you watch a silent film, and then you listen to text in the dark without an image as a performance. And I did that in Berlin and in Los Angeles. It was very successful. I need to do that more. It's a really nice film. But that inspired me to make the Cigarettes film. Mm-hmm. So the Cigarettes is inspired indirectly by the Warhol screen test, because first it inspired me to remake the North on Evers, and consider the portraits I had done in there, and then that inspired me to make more portraits.
Oh, okay. And so had you maybe decided to do a project with portraits, and then the cigarette component was...
Yeah, that came from RR, because I wanted to continue this idea of having something that's in the frame, suggest what the shot length would be. Like the trains control the shot length, beginning and end of the train, and beginning end of the cigarette does it the same way. And then it was a device so I could look at people longer. And with them, I mean, I set up a very uncomfortable situation anyway, so I don't know if it made it any more comfortable.
Right. So a lot of the films that I've seen by you have a very specific and a very simple idea. For instance, the skies and the lakes and railroad. And in a way you get an idea of what you will see very explicitly before you actually watch the film, but then when you're watching it, there are many unforeseen components and emotions and ideas that sort of spring forth. And I was wondering if there was anything that you unforeseen that happened with 20 Cigarettes that you hadn't foreseen when you were conceptualizing the project.
Well, I think the main thing was to realize that I had come from when I finished the film and I watched it, I realized that I had just documented a kind of diversity that would have been unheard of from where I came from, and being born into a place that wasn't diverse at all and was filled with prejudice and hatred. And I'm not belittling the people I lived with because it was poor whites fighting poor blacks, and that's kind of institutionalized. There's no analysis of poverty for those people, so they're played off against each other. They're both fighting for the same jobs, and there's a kind of built-in stuff that keeps them fighting rather than getting them together. And ironically, they all have the same problems, to find housing and a good job and be secure and all of that. So, I mean, I came from that place, but I think when I watched the film the first time, it just struck me really strongly that I made a giant voyage from my past, and that was a winner. Even though I knew when I was making the film I wanted a certain kind of diversity in the film because I wanted to represent both men and women and old and young and rich and poor and black and white and brown and yellow and all of those different ways. And and when I watch it now, I see certain gestures that happen that are common to all of them, and then for instance, the very young boy has a playfulness that the other ones have lost, so I think that's kind of interesting. He's kind of fooling, with the thing. And maybe the guy in front of his shop is kind of fooling too, and he's older, so there's a kind of connection between somebody older and younger there that they both have kind of something.
So when you, oftentimes you'll digitally, or you'll change the sound in some way, or in this case, and with Roy, you'll digitally change the image.
Yeah.
That did take place on both counts with 20 Cigarettes?
Yeah, I fooled with things.
When you're doing that, is it because you're trying to very subtly bring out some of the themes or ideas that you had wanted to come
both.
across?
I mean, that's the main thrust to do that, to make things clearer about how I feel and how I'm seeing things. So I don't feel like I'm lying. I'm reinforcing what the truth is that I see. But it's also that this is a really new medium for me, and it's seductive, because all of a sudden I can do things I never could do. And it starts with just simple color correction, where I used to color correct all my films, but now I can change contrast, which I never could do before. And once you do that, you realize, oh, this new medium allows me to make any kind of light look good all of a sudden, because in post I can change flat light to have a really beautiful contrast. I can make it look like the magic hour if I want, And these things weren't available to me before. And then once you start doing that, then I think, oh, I can do a lot of things with this. I can collage images. I can add something to the image that, like, I can put up in the corner a note on the wall with 2 pins saying a boy and a battery that wasn't there. You know, I can do that if I want to.
Was changing some parts of the image in very subtle ways something that when you were working with film before you had ever worked with digital, was it something that you had sort of wanted out of the
No,
media?
not really. I mean, I always wanted to be able to make the image have the feel of the place that I was in. So I always wanted to be able to change color and want to change contrast and all of that, which I couldn't do, but I could change color, but very minimally, because I would do little snippet tests and do color corrections on just a few frames at a time, so I wouldn't be running my original through constantly until we get the color right. And that was easy to do when I was making films with 10 shots. Rather than put through an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of film, each put through 10 frame lengths, and then they do it for free because it's so short, and then constantly doing the timing over and over and over until I get the color right. But now I do it in 2 seconds, and I see it immediately. Pull a little ball over here, it gets greener, it gets yellow, and change contrast. Click on an arrow to see what it looks like without that correction and with that correction, and it's pure magic, totally seductive. I mean, in a sense, there's an irony to all of this new technology, because in a way it's made filmmaking much more controllable for me, so there's a kind of an autonomy that I never had in filmmaking, but then computers themselves I think they're kind of evil, that they steal what real life is about, and you find yourself in front of them constantly, and you forget what real life is, and so as far as the filmmaking process, I like them, but overall I think computers are really going to lead us to a really bad place.
So is it safe to say that you'll probably never dabble in 3D filmmaking?
I don't get the I don't know why people want to do that, but who knows? Maybe I'll want to. The only way you can see 3D is by crossing your eyes, basically, too. So it's got to be hard on viewers, I would think.
Yeah, I even saw a film in the festival already, Pina, which is that Ben Bender's 3D dance documentary, and all of the glasses were so glossy that when we were watching the film, or at least when I was, the image was flipped upside down in the glare of the lenses.
Yeah.
So I was constantly seeing 2 images in the mirror.
But I mean, sooner or later it'll look just like this, It won't be called 3D. It'll just be, we'll reproduce what we see. I'm sure that's going to happen.
You teach at CalArts, I think you have for a while. I was wondering if your teaching strategies have changed at all because of your switch from film to digital, if you push one over the other now?
Oh no, I would never do that. I mean, that's a choice of the student as to what medium they work in. That would be like telling somebody, to paint rather than to make sculpture. That's I mean, I mainly teach the idea that perception, that you have to know about the world before you can make art, and the only way to know about the world is to pay attention to the world, to practice paying attention, which is hard. The mind nauseous thinking about other things. That's why some of my films are difficult for audiences. It asks an audience to pay attention, generally like they don't pay attention.
Right.
So it's frustrating.
In your class, I think I remember you saying that one of your classes is specifically about listening and
looking. Yeah, I stopped teaching that for a while, but I might do it again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best thing I've ever done, but it involves going out in the world, and schools today are getting so afraid to go out into the world. There's too many lawyers in the world that they're afraid of lawsuits and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have to learn, if you want to learn something, you can't be a baby, you got to put your face somewhere else.